So Quinn, it's story time here. I my friend got so mad at me that they ruined their birthday. But that's so ridiculous. I didn't even know today was their birthday. There is no birthday, thank God. Or else I would be disowned by whoever friend I was joking about. But welcome to DQ Frenzy here, the first off-season edition of the DQ Frenzy with Dylan Shields and Quinn Schmiedel, as always here. And basically here, we're going to have Quinn introduce a format. This will be later on in the show because at first we're going to cover some groundbreaking news because we have a lot of them. But we are going to do something all off season. Quinn, take it away.
So basically, we're going to go through all of the divisions and go team by team and look at their past or this past season, talk about the big, exciting things that happened, the disappointing, and some of the in-betweens. Just give you a recap of their season because if you're a Steelers fan, you watch the Steelers and you'll watch some other games, but you probably don't watch like the Seahawks. And so like by going over here, we can talk about, you can kind of be like, oh, okay, that's what the Seahawks are doing. Like maybe you knew their record, they didn't get into the playoffs, but kind of give you an idea, summary of this season. And, it's sad that football is over, but through this, you'll get to kind of like relive the season a little bit and find out about things that happened.
It's never truly over.
Exactly. So we're going to be bringing you the past season again. And so we're going to be doing that. And then the second part is we're going to look at those teams again and talk about what they need to do for the draft and start talking about that, get that hype up because the draft is fun, especially if you're a fan of a team with a higher pick. Not so much for the Eagles because it's last, but still exciting nonetheless. You can get some great players. But it should be a lot of fun. And yeah, we'll just be going over this. We'll have some special guests coming up, potentially as soon as next week. I think it'll be a lot of fun, peek. But yeah, stay tuned. And we haven't quite decided on the order of the divisions. We are starting with the NFC East or NFC Beast this week. But yeah, we'll figure out the order if everything works out how it's seeming, or hopefully will next week. We'll jump over to the AFC East. So maybe we'll just jump between, do both the cardinal directions and for each. So maybe next week it'll be 2 weeks from now.
We're
be
so
the AFC North.
For planning this so ahead of time, aren't we?
Yeah, it's right. Exactly. We're living in the moment. And that's fun. And everyone's going to have fun with us. And it'll be a surprise for you because you guys don't know what's coming up next. So, yeah.
Hey,
stay tuned.
You only live once. You only live once. But yeah, apologies for the little gap. But again, Quinn and I are busy in our lives. But we will consistently try to get episodes out throughout the off season, especially towards the draft, because this division thing is so fun. But before we get to that, Quinn, ring out the siren. Woo! We got breaking news. Literally just happened around 20 minutes ago. Davante Adams is in LA, not the team you would expect for a receiver needed team. He's going to the LA Rams. Yes, a big acquisition there for the Rams. Now, there's a lot of other moves that have happened here, so I'm just going to go through them. So we are not spending 2 hours talking about each individual player. So we got the Davante move. Earlier today, Myles Garrett has been extended with the Cleveland Browns, so he's not going anywhere. He averaged, I think his contract's around $40 million a year, $123.5 million in guarantee money, 4-year extension.
No trade
so good
clause.
No trade clause. Good for him. T. Higgins is tagged again, and I think his deal is around a little over $20 million, $20.6 million. So that's honestly decent for a tag. But yes, poor T. Higgins has to deal with the tag, and he's still a Cincinnati Bengal. Your man, Saquon Barkley, is now the highest paid running back in NFL history. I think that's no shock there to anyone who's a big Eagles fan, but there you go. And Max Crosby has also been extended by the Las Vegas Raiders and is not going anywhere. So some guys staying, but a lot of people going to new places here. So in the grand scheme of things, Quinn, I think especially we'll emphasize the Devontae move since this is like breaking news and big news. It just NFL free agency in general. What's your reaction to these maneuvers right now?
Well, this is crazy. I mean, I did not expect Devontae Adams to go to the Rams. That's though it makes sense because they did really well in the playoffs last year. They were very close to beating the Eagles, the Super Bowl champions. So if they would have beaten them, they probably would have had a darn good chance to go to the Super Bowl and potentially win. Although, well, I don't know if any other teams could have done what the Eagles did with that pass rush, but we'll never know. But they had a pretty darn good season. So, I mean, they got Stafford back. I mean, they're replacing Kupp with Adams, which I want to say Kupp's a little younger than Adams. But it's interesting to see. I mean, it's
I know Adams
great.
is a lot more of a vet. He's been around a little bit longer.
Kupp is 1 year younger.
Yeah, so age-wise, I guess, is not the biggest.
Yeah, it seems kind of interesting, though. They're like, Kupp, we don't want you, but we will take a guy that's like 1 year younger, actually like 6-ish months. Let's say 7 months older than you, which is, I don't know, I guess it's a contract. But, I mean, it's probably a good move. I mean, Adams he's been good, but exciting move. I mean, the Myles Garrett is disappointing because as an Eagles fan, I wanted us to get Myles Garrett because that would have been really fun.
Okay.
But very interesting. He played that if he actually wanted to leave the Browns, which seems like he doesn't, and he never did, but he played that really well. And I want to trade. I'm demanding a trade. I'm not going to play in Cleveland. I want to win. And Cleveland's like, oh, here, have $200 million. And he's like, I think I'll stay here. And there's a no trade clause, which I'm sure we'll hear more about, but I don't know if that's a Browns or a Garrett thing. Seems more like a Browns option, to be honest. But, I mean, kind of disappointing for everyone. Like, oh, look, a generational talent could be on the move, go to a new team, like how it was with Reggie White and the Eagles going to the Packers and win the Super Bowl. But, I mean, it's a big move, but kind of disappointing he stayed, but that's just me. Yeah, interesting. I mean, Higgins, it seemed kind of weird for the Bengals to franchise tag him again because it's $20 million. That's a lot. That's basically a contract. I don't know how much he'll end up getting paid one day, but kind of pushing everything off doesn't seem like the best way to do it when contracts keep getting higher and higher. You know, Micah Parsons will come in and be probably a highest paid player soon, and then Jamar Chase probably wants to be the highest as well. So.
Everyone wants to be the highest.
The Bengals are not doing themselves any favors by pushing Higgins' deal off and off and off. Because even though he's not their number one, he very well can get paid like a number one and demand a big contract. But someone you mentioned or didn't mention, I'll just mention because he's a little important, is Zach Bond getting re-signed. That was a big deal for Eagles fans because that was like the number one thing that I wanted, number one guy I wanted back because he's just super talented. He only played a year, yes, but he doesn't have a lot of like tread or wear on his tires. Like this is his first like full year playing, and under Fangio, I think he's still going to do pretty well and keep up the consistency in his production, and hopefully he does. But that was big. But yeah, and there's a lot of smaller moves that we're not going to mention, like Aaron Jones re-signed with the Vikings, but like we don't have time to talk about everything. But like the big things, it's pretty exciting. Yeah, although I bet Dylan's a bit disappointed about Devontae Adams not going to the Steelers, or
Well, I mean, there's so many guys in free agency that the Steelers could have. I mean, the running back situation, even like I heard Aaron Jones to the Steelers was a bunch of rumors, but he just stays. Every year, there's always just like speculation and just pick teams that need positions and he'll go to this team, because they're free agents, all just to re-sign him. So it's like, what's the point of even like hyping it up? But The one thing I find funny is the Max Crosby extension. He was the
Yeah.
highest paid non-quarterback for like a couple days, and then Myles Garrett's like Uno reverse card. You ain't the highest paid even player at your own position anymore, buddy. For both guys, it's definitely well deserved money wise. It's just both similar situations though in which their teams suck, but money talks. And it feels like with Crosby and Garrett, I mean, maybe they trust the team. I'd feel a little bit better if I was Max Crosby because even though he's a minority owner, you have Tom Brady at the helm, and maybe he could do a good job of building guys. A move I forgot to mention: Geno Smith is a Las Vegas Raider, so they found their quarterback temporarily. I think he's kind of a placeholder guy for them to really draft someone in the future, but it's better than what they've had. So I'd much rather be in his position than in Myles' position, where I have no clue what they're going to do. We have no clue if it's worth picking a quarterback with the top two. It seems like that's where they're going.
But
I mean, Garrett alone.
Carter.
Yeah,
two great pass rushers. So, yeah.
That Browns defense can be lethal. It already is. It's never like in the top, but it's around there, especially in the pass rush ranks because of Garrett alone. So it's well deserved. It's just crazy that both of them, especially Garrett's like, I want to go on a winning team. Cha-ching, cha-ching. Well, yeah, never mind. So, but still, like I said, well deserved. Another move that I think I forgot to mention. Well, one minor one. Seattle's in the shit right now. That's all I gotta say because Geno's gone. Tyler Lockett got released earlier this week, and now DK Metcalf wants a trade. He wants out. That was kind of, I think, the past year, I believe, rumored that Metcalf has some issues with the team. And now I feel like Seattle's going full-on rebuild at this point with everybody they're getting rid of. So that's kind of interesting there. The other moves, I mean, I'll let Quinn, you have a say on the Metcalf thing once I wrap up, but the T. Higgins thing, not surprised at all. If the Bengals had control of the situation, they were not going to just let him go. Like, it's just an unfortunate situation. He's still making a decent amount of money for being tagged, but it's crazy how 2 years in a row he's getting kind of fucked over with this. He just wants to be a number one somewhere. But the Bengals, I feel like, need him because the focus is so on Jamar. He's getting double teamed all the time, and the dude still puts up elite numbers. But to have a number two like T is very crucial. They just need to get their crap together on the defensive side. But yeah, and then Saquon, are we really surprised? No, dude's probably the best player in all football last year. He deserves it. But yeah, Quinn, what did you think? Since I forgot to mention it, of Metcalf, what destinations you have for him?
Well, I've heard that Patriots fans were like, oh, we can trade for A.J. Brown. That'd be great. And then now the Patriots fans are like, all right, we know that's not going to happen. But DK Metcalf is like, I don't want to say a poor man's A.J. Brown. He's very talented. He's similar, like, build and play style. Not as good as A.J. Brown. But, like, a cheaper A.J. Brown, that would be great. I think a lot of teams are going to want him. He's a very good player. Maybe a little bit weird in hair styling choices, and Nesquik bunny commercials. But, whatever makes him happy.
Diet, especially in Metcalf's case, a diet.
Yeah, but not too surprising. The Barkley I forgot to mention, but that's great. That it feels like that's what Jeffrey Lurie, our Eagles owner, is like. You know what? This guy deserves a reward. We pay our players that do well. Here's the money. And like same thing with Bond. They're like, oh, you know what? You played well for us. We're going to give you money, which is great because it's like players who might be free agents next year or this year are like, okay, well, where do I want to go? And if Philly's an option, they're like, well, if I ball out there, I know they're going to give me the money because they did it before. So I think that's a great move for the Eagles. I'll mention two, not quite signing news, but some interesting news that Chiefs Xavier Worthy was arrested on Friday on family assault charge or family.
What is with Chiefs players, specifically wide receivers?
It's ridiculous.
In the offseason.
How hard is it? Like, I guess the Chiefs just aren't drafting those mature guys and just going more for talent, kind of like what the Steelers are doing with wide
Oh
receivers.
yeah, I can relate to that big time.
Yeah, so you understand. I mean, Pickens isn't getting arrested in the offseason, so I think you guys are doing a little bit better. But like, damn, like, how hard is it to be a decent person? Apparently, pretty damn hard for Chiefs wide receivers. But yeah, it's interesting.
It's been a strange post Super Bowl where we've gotten a lot of news pretty quickly.
It is
not that. Yeah, it is. The other move I would mention, it's not that big of a deal, at least to me, is Debo is going to the Commanders. Just because Debo is literally riding off of 1 year he had still. It's a good piece for the Commanders. It's nothing even close groundbreaking though to like Devontae, let's say. But I think it's a good fit for them.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't happy when I heard it, but Debo isn't exactly the Debo he was that 1 year where he was that great wide back. I mean, he's good, but I don't know. We'll just have to see. I think he could fit well with the Commanders' offense with the just kind of shifty, running, tricky offense, but I don't know. It's better to have him than not, though. So, I mean, kudos to them, to the Commanders for signing him. But
yeah, can't complain. But Quinn, it is time to do the hyped up thing that you mentioned not even 15 minutes ago, and that is division recap / what we think they should do for the future, starting with the NFC East. And how we're going to do it here, at least in terms of if it's just me and Quinn, we're going to split teams since there's 4 in each division, do 2 and 2. And I believe, Quinn, you are going to do Philly and Giants. And I'm going to do the Commies and the Cowgirls. So I'm going to start with you, Quinn, because I believe you want to start off with your champs. We're going to let you get started with your 2 teams. So, Quinn, it's all you.
Yeah, we feel it was only right to start with the Super Bowl champions, just start with them and go on. I figured I'd take the Giants because I'm going to be a little biased on the Commanders and Cowboys because they're a bit better. Well, the Cowboys aren't, but they're just, the rival. So I took the Giants as well. I think I'm a little less biased with them. But yeah, starting with the Eagles. So again, just to summarize what I said earlier, I'm going to be going over like some of the stuff during the season, some of the big games, news, and then talk about some other things like one thing to do to improve, which I mean I'll have to rework one of them, but and
how to improve the Super Bowl champions.
Yeah, but yeah, so I'm gonna go over that for my teams, and we'll do that, and then we'll go and shift to the second part of the draft. So that way I'm not talking about the Eagles for 20 minutes, but break it up a little, have a little more fun that way. And that way Dylan can comment after each team. I figure we can comment on each other's any thoughts, big takeaways. That way it's not just one of us talking forever, But yeah, starting with the Eagles, I mean, they won the Super Bowl. This is a great season for them. I mean, I was hoping for this. And it'll be interesting to see if they can do it again. But I'm going to start with the biggest win of the season. And for simplicity's sake, I'll do 2, one for the regular season, one for the postseason. Because obviously the biggest win is the Super Bowl. Like, that's a great win right there. I mean, obviously we got a Lombardi from it. And we just dominated the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he didn't have an O-line, basically. No one decided to block. And just the pure domination of arguably the best team in football, the latest dynasty, it was a phenomenal win for the Eagles. So a pretty easy gimme win there. But for the regular season, it's kind of tough because, I mean, on one hand, the Browns is really when we started to bounce back after winning and losing 2 games each. We started the season in Brazil, won that, but then we lost to the Saints. Well, we lost to the Falcons. Barkley dropped the pass, and then we beat the Saints just in the fourth quarter, basically, and then lost to the Buccaneers on that 100-degree day in Tampa, and that was our worst loss of the season. I guess I should put that in there. So yeah, Bucks was the worst loss of the season. I mean, it was one of our few losses, but 33-16. We just looked bad. I don't know if the Bucks just have our number or we just don't play well against them. Maybe, to be honest, I don't remember where all the games were in the past where we played, but maybe we're just not good in Tampa and the Heat. I don't know, but that was definitely our worst loss. And then we had our bye week and we started bouncing back. So, like, on one hand, you could say that Browns win was one of our best wins, not because it was the prettiest, but because we started bouncing back. It was 20-16. We went on. Speaking of that game, Myles Garrett blocked an extra kick, or sorry, not an extra kick, the field goal attempt, and they got a touchdown off of that, which is why it was 16-20. But it wasn't. It was kind of ugly, but then we started climbing back. So, like, the Bengals was a good win because, I mean, the Bengals were great this season, but our defense started locking up players, and we started scoring a lot, 37-17 against the Bengals. But I'm going to go ahead and say the best win, partially because it's more exciting, is the Eagles-Ravens. Eagles 24, Ravens 19. First time we won in Baltimore against the Ravens in years. I don't remember the specific number at this point, but great win. We beat Lamar Jackson, arguably one of the best AFC teams out there. And it really kind of set the tone of like, oh, can the Eagles beat the Ravens? Probably not. People were saying, oh, the Ravens are going to win. But no, the Eagles came in there and whooped their butts. So I'm going to say the Eagles-Ravens was the Eagles' best win. The biggest disappointment of the season, I wouldn't say there's a lot, and especially considering we won the Super Bowl, but I'm going to go ahead and say Agent Zero, our acquisition of Agent Zero, Bryce Huff, just not really doing anything was kind of the biggest disappointment. I mean, we paid him a lot of money.
Wow, that affected so much.
Yeah, it did. So, yeah, that's the thing. There's not a lot of disappointments, but I'll say he's a disappointment. I'll say the biggest surprise was Zach Bond coming out and being absolutely phenomenal. You could probably argue one of the two rookie cornerbacks, but I mean, we kind of expected them to be good. I mean, Cooper DeJean was supposed to be a first-round pick. Quinyon Mitchell obviously was the first cornerback off the board. Great. And so I think the biggest surprise was Zach Bond coming in. And then news-wise, we didn't really have a lot of news. I mean, A.J. Brown got hurt a little bit early in the season, but he turned out to be fine. We didn't really sign anyone during the season, at least I remember anyone big. We just kind of went there and hit the grind, you know. But the turning point in the season definitely was after that bye week, week 5 bye week, where we came around, beat the Browns, and our defense started clicking. Fangio's scheme started getting in the guys' heads, and we just rolled at that point. The only time we lost since then was the Commanders when Jalen Hurts got hurt in the, I forget if it was late first or early second quarter. But to credit the Commanders, they did play very well. Jaden Daniels balled out 36-33. But yeah, we really hit the turning point at our bye week and just rolled. Injuries-wise, like I said, A.J. Brown got a little hurt. I think Hurts was a little banged up at the end of the season, but regular season at least. But that didn't seem to matter too much. We just went in playoffs and rolled. And I mean, the playoffs were great. I mean, Packers, we kind of beat them. We rested our starters against the Giants, week 17. We got the second seed, so we didn't get the bye. But the Packers was a good team in that sense because their wide receivers were hurt. So we kind of got lucky there and kind of got to shake the rust off a bit. Wasn't our prettiest win, but it was 22-10. All their wide receivers are out, which is unfortunate, but that's how it happens sometimes. It was the 7th seed game. The Packers winning in unbelievable fashion as a 7th seed for a second year in a row would have been really impressive, but this isn't the Cowboys they're playing, unfortunately. Then the Rams snow game, very close. Barkley got the 2 long touchdowns, 28-22. Incredible. The closest game, I'd say, of the season, just mostly because it's the playoffs. But definitely exciting, the most nervous I've been for the Eagles season. And then, of course, the conference championship, 55-23 against the Commanders. Commanders got rolled. They did just destroy the Lions the previous week, and Eagles looked good. And then, won the Super Bowl, rolled, talked about that. But Finally, to summarize the Eagles bit of the season, I think if I had to say one thing to do to improve, all right, right after the Super Bowl or a few days after, I would have said make sure to re-sign your players like Zach Bond. But honestly, one thing to improve, the most important thing right now, I think, would be to re-sign Mekhi Becton, who seemingly wants to stay, or potentially Isaiah Rodgers because we let go of Slay and Bradbury. So we need another cornerback. We can manage. We apparently really like Kiwi Ringo and Eli Ricks, I believe. But it'd be, I think, Mekhi Becton keeping your line up front together. And for a guy that really came in here and rejuvenated his career, I think it'd be great if he got to stay. And I mean, he has mentioned that like the Eagles believed in me. I want to stay. I want to fight for them. So, yeah, I would say the biggest thing, just re-sign your players, Mekhi Becton especially. But Dylan, you have any thoughts or comments about Eagles season?
It was a good season. It was a great season. There's not much to it than that because the really only down was like when you had that 2-game losing streak and you wanted Sirianni fired for about a minute, and then it just turned around. Then they were just dominant, and even as the 2 seed and the Lions were the 1, people liked Philly better. We were saying it throughout the year. They were the most complete team, and it showed. They needed everybody on that field to contribute, and they did. And everyone played a key role. And yeah, they were the most complete. They were the number 1 defense. They're one of the best offenses. Say what you will about Hurts. He proved a lot of people wrong in a lot of games, including the Super Bowl itself, where Barkley didn't do much, but it didn't matter because the passing attack and pass rush was lethal. So yeah, and there's no reason to think that Philly can't be, I don't want to say dynasty yet, but like they're going to be competing for Super Bowls for a while as long as the key guys like Hurts and Brown are still there. So, and Sirianni, give him all the flack. Seems like a good leader, though. Players rally to him. So, and my actual Siri just puts off. That's actually hilarious. I shouldn't have said his name, but yeah, I'm gonna. There's nothing you can. Shut up. I won't say your Eagles coach's name again, but yeah, it was just a good season. That's all I had to say, and that was it. You're champions.
Yeah,
So are you going to move on to the Giants, or do you want me? Are we going to flip flop? It's up to you. What you think
let's
the best
flip
thing
flop.
To do?
Yeah, let's flip flop a bit, so that way,
okay.
Yeah.
To restore some balance, Thanos style.
Yeah, balance.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, we'll start with good team. So I'll do the Commanders, and then we'll both do the bad of the NFC East. Now that is the Washington Commanders. I don't think anybody saw this season coming. Like, I think the only speculations is like I heard at the beginning of the season, they're a sleeper team. Don't sleep on Daniels. But I think a lot of people, especially, were worried about his injury prone. I think he had some rib injury in the middle of the year, but I think he only missed like a game against the Panthers, so it didn't mean much. So he stayed healthy, and he played damn good. I mean, we were saying this, probably one of the best rookie years, if not the best in NFL history. And that's not, I don't think that's an overreaction at all. I mean, he threw for around a little over 3,500 yards, 25 TDs to only 9 picks, which is very impressive as a rookie. He was second in the league in rushing with 891, pretty close to Lamar's 915. That's pretty impressive. And he had 6 rushing TDs. And he did a lot with not a lot around him, if you know what I mean, because he didn't have the best supporting cast around him, which I think is what made this rookie season even more impressive. He had Scary Terry, which he did fine, a little over 1,000 yards. The touchdowns is what made the difference with 13. And Zach Ertz, of all people, kind of turned back the clock. He was their second leading receiver on the whole team, with
He got resigned, too.
654 and 7 touchdowns. Yeah, and that's earned him a re-signing, which I think is deserved. The running game, too, was just kind of average to me. Like, Daniels led the team. Brian Robinson had like 799 yards, 4 touchdowns. Eckler, 4 touchdowns. Just a lot of average. A lot of average. And the defense themselves, not that great. One of the worst statistically defensive teams in the league, pretty much. Like, their pass rush was ranked pretty low. Their secondary was a big issue on the team. Like they got exposed against some teams like Baltimore on the defense. If we're gonna go like high points of the season in terms of wins, you kind of have to say Philly. I know Kenny Pickett had to come in that game, but they beat the Super Bowl champions in a close game. I mean, the Atlanta win to get them in was like a close second, but Atlanta really didn't set anybody on fire at all. Their schedule really wasn't that difficult. It was weird. They kind of lost in the regular season to the legit teams, mostly to the Ravens. They lost at Tampa, which they're a playoff team. They lost to the Steelers, who fell off at the end of the year, but were really good at the time. And they lost the first game to Philly. And their most disappointing loss was probably Dallas, because like Dallas had a very off season, but they still have talent, and the Commanders are still a young team, so that's just bound to happen. So it wasn't like an awful loss, but I mean, yeah, it was just an unbelievable season for the Commanders. Like I said, like the main focal point is Daniels. He won Rookie of the Year by a landslide for a reason, and there's nowhere to go but up, because if the roster around him wasn't that good, but they still got that far to the NFC Championship game, now you got pieces to add with Daniels on a rookie contract. Garrett, I feel like the Commanders was my leading team for them to get. It was a little disappointing they couldn't, but there's a man from Penn State in that draft, which I don't know if he's like how ranked he is. I don't know. Maybe they could trade up for a pick. But yeah, there's Abdul Carter. He might go, but there's a bunch of other edge rushers that are pretty decent. James Pierce specifically is pretty decent. Mike Green from Marshall's kind of like an underrated guy because of the college he's going to. So there's some decent guys. I think, like I said, that's basically sliding into the draft. That's mainly what they need. Maybe get some secondary help in the later rounds as well for them. And I don't know. It's tough with the running backs because Daniels basically is a running back and a quarterback. You don't exactly need a Saquon Barkley on your team. Like, Daniels is that guy. Maybe I think Debo helps. The wide back helps a lot. Even if he's not going to be prime Debo, he'll probably produce pretty well on the team. So, yeah, I just think for the Commanders, it's just, fix your defense and keep Jaden healthy, because as long as they do, there's no reason why they can't make the playoffs again. So, yeah, very good season for the Commanders.
Yeah. So, now we're going to jump to the not-so-good teams. And we are going to start with the Giants. They were the last place in the division, didn't even sniff the playoffs, had 3 wins. Well, let's go over the season first. So they started off with Daniel Jones as their quarterback, lost Saquon in the offseason because last year the year before that, they paid Daniel Jones and not Saquon Barkley, which, I mean, it happens. So Barkley's gone. Daniel Jones. They have Tyrone Tracy Jr., I believe, new running back. He did pretty well this season. Not Barkley, but at least they got a replacement. But they ended up releasing Daniel Jones. What week was it?
It was pretty deep into the season.
Yeah,
I know that, around maybe week 15, week 16 mark. And then he went to Minnesota to be a backup.
Yeah, November 18th, he was benched, and 22nd, he was asked to be released. And he was. And yeah, like Dylan said, he went to the Vikings. But yeah, so he his last game with the team was against the Panthers, which they lost in overtime to 17-20. So after that, they were starting Tommy DeVito, Drew Lock. Just I don't know what they're trying to do exactly. I guess they're trying to see who's the better backup quarterback. And I mean, I'd say Drew Lock kind of answered that question because he went in and beat the Indianapolis Colts, put their playoffs dreams to bed, 45-33. Drew Lock went off for 309 yards and 4 touchdowns. I mean, and at this point, before this game, the Giants had the number 1 pick. So they're like, okay, we suck, but at least we're going to get a great quarterback. We're going to have the pick of all of them. And though this draft isn't exactly great for quarterbacks, which we will talk about in the future, but it's not great for quarterbacks. But at least the Giants could get whoever they wanted, right? They could take Shedeur Sanders, who might be risky, but I don't know. He seems good. Could take Cam Ward from Miami. I don't know. But instead, Drew Lock came in and said, no, I'm going to win this game and get my personal stock up. And so, yeah, not only did they kick the Colts out of the playoffs, they also kicked themselves out of the number 1 pick. And I believe now they have the number 3 pick, which they might not even be able to get a quarterback at this point. But that was both the most, positive win of their 3 and the most disappointing. Well, it's not even a loss, but I'll say it's a loss because they just lost the number 1 pick. So that was both their best and worst game. And that just kind of summarizes the Giants' season. Funny. I mean, they're like, look, we won, but at what cost? And, so what was the point of that? I mean, I get morale's important, but, for the organization, terrible thing to happen. Absolutely terrible. Couldn't happen to a nicer team, But, yeah, they just kind of – they didn't score a lot. They let up a lot of points. I mean, they lost 35-14 to the Giants, which ended the season. And also the Cowboys by 7, which the Cowboys aren't very good this year. They kind of varied, but Dylan will talk about that soon. But it's – they beat the Seahawks 29-20. That was one of their other wins, and their final win was against the Browns, 21-15, in the very beginning of the season, 3rd week. But yeah, it was a disappointing season. I mean, at least games were somewhat close for the most part. I mean, they lost the Commanders by 3 points early in the season, week 2. They lost the Commanders again by 5 later on. Lost the Steelers by 8. Panthers by 3 in overtime. Saints by 3. Cowboys by 7. I mentioned that. But it's just disappointing for Giants fans. And, I mean, their bright spot was Malik Neighbors. They drafted him in the 1st round, and he did great. He was the best rookie wide receiver, I think, out of all of them. And there's some very good wide receivers this year. But he was really their lone offensive bright spot. I mean, Tyron Chasey was good as well. And so at least it looks like they'll have somewhat of an offense if they get a quarterback. They'll at least have guys to throw the ball to, which is good. Their defense, I don't know their rank specifically, but they weren't exactly great. I mean, they let up a lot of points. They let up 34 to the Falcons, like I said, 35 to the Ravens, 33 to the Colts in their win, 30 to the Bucks. It wasn't great. I mean, their pass rusher they drafted a few years ago, can't remember his name, but he was supposed to be great, and he didn't play that well. They might move on from him. They could really use some help at defensive end and pass rushing in general. So maybe they try and get a guy like Josh Sweat. I believe Milton Williams has an unofficial deal inked with the Patriots already. But, I mean, they brought in Brian Burns, so I believe did pretty well, but not quite well enough. I think he got 10 sacks. But they have some talent. They have some optimistic reasons to be optimistic, but they really need a quarterback, and we'll talk about that again later. But yeah, I feel like their biggest outcome from the season was they need a quarterback. They let Daniel Jones go, and it felt like they had a limp, and Daniel Jones was their crutch. But they actually need They need to get in like a car, like a wheelchair, and then they'll be able to get going and then build up. And I don't know what that analogy was. Anyway, but yeah, they need a quarterback, and that's their biggest issue right now. Once they get that, they can kind of start looking at other things. But quarterback, I think their offense can start humming a little bit, maybe, and then they just can focus on their defense, which not terrible, but could also use some work. But yeah, Giants season disappointing, but some promising bright spots.
Yeah, at least there's a little bit of light in that darkness for the Giants. It's going to be a while for them to really get, especially in that division, like over the top, because they're just in a complete rebuild. But it's better to have some pieces than none. So can't complain. It's just, yeah, some of those useless wins at the end for them not to get the number one just really sucks. But hey, Giants fans have been used to it. But it's time to save not the worst for last statistically, but in Quinn's mind, the worst for last, and that's the Dallas Cowboys themselves. What of a mess of a season this was. And it started not even before the season started with this man right here that needs to get his ass out of the Cowboys office as soon as possible. Waiting till the last minute, literally the day of week 1 to sign Dak, and waiting really long to extend CD as well, to the point where he had to hold out at camp because of that. So that was already a bad start to the season. And then their defense was just a mess. The Saints, of all people, torched them in week 2. And then they had like a miracle comeback against Baltimore that came up short. But the downfall started around the fall, because their worst loss of the season, I mean, I would give it like a 1A and 1B, because you look at like the scoreboard, it's clearly the Lions lost. They lost 47-9. They just looked completely outclassed by a clearly Super Bowl team. They looked horrible. Jerry Jones was just beside himself. And yeah, it was just a mess. But I argue 1B could be the Falcons, where they lost 27-21. And that's just because the game Dak got hurt and was out for the season. So that was just a bad moment there. That basically ended it, because Cooper Rush is not shabby as a backup, but he's not going to really get you to the playoffs. And there were some games too where I think he had injury problems. And when you have to play Trey Lance in a regular season game, you might as well just wave that white flag right now and consider your season over. But yeah, injury-wise, it was just a complete mess for the Cowboys. I mean, I will say running back-wise, a lot of people were like criticizing that. But Rico Dowdle wasn't too shabby for himself with over 1,000 yards, only 2 touchdowns. But, I mean, he might be, I don't know, I guess say their guy, but he's not a terrible option. So I feel like they might have that filled. Maybe he needs someone better than Zeke to be a number 2. He would need someone to the equivalent of like a James Warren that the Steelers have, someone to help him out a little bit. I don't know what the free agency looks like for running backs, but I feel like they could definitely use that. But I mean, I'll go back to the old man. I've said it forever. I think he's the problem there. Like, he's just so stubborn and in his way all the damn time. Remember that weird period where I think you mentioned it, they told the Bears, no, you don't get to interview McCarthy, only to fire him a couple weeks later. It just makes no sense. And then you hire Brian Schottenheimer, so one of the most uninspiring hires I've ever seen, a guy who wasn't even that good of a coordinator. And I just don't know where the Cowboys go from here. I mean, Dak will be back. CD will be back. Parsons most likely will be back, even though he doesn't seem the most happy where he is. On paper, there's a lot of good names on that team. One of them did retire, though, Zach Martin. That's a big loss for them that they might need to fill, maybe draft-wise. But on paper, they're pretty good. They got Trayvon Diggs as a really good corner, like I mentioned, Parsons. But they're just it's always usually January when you're just like, okay, they could be good for a season, then they're just gonna shit the bed in January. They didn't even wait this year to do it because it just got into crap in October. So yeah, I just think, especially now that the Commanders and Eagles, I don't think are going anywhere. I think they're in a little bit of trouble, and it's going to be a little bit tougher for them to really get back on it now because they don't really have a good enough pick to get some elite player. Like I mentioned, running back, like that Boise State one's going to be high on that board, and they ain't going to be able to get him. So I just don't know where you go from here. I mean, Dak's extension, he's a good quarterback, but people are always going to say, like, is he worth it? This is now 2 season-ending surgeries this man's had. I see you shaking your head there. But yeah, I just think Cowboys' future's in limbo. I mean, honestly, at least for the Giants, they have good enough picks and are in rebuilding, while the Cowboys are kind of just stuck in mediocrity. They kind of give me Saints vibes a little bit, where they just can't get out of this mess, and now they're stuck with all these contracts. So you gotta hope somehow they super exceed your expectations.
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying with the running back, like for instance, Eckler was really good with the Commanders when he wasn't hurt because he was a kind of versatile piece. He was there and he could make some moves, make some plays, but he got hurt, so we didn't get to see a lot of him. But the Cowboys needs someone like that would be great, or just honestly just a main running back. I mean, they really probably should have kept the guy they sent to the Titans and Tony Pollard, but yeah, and like they re-signed Osha Odigizua, and like I think they restructured Dak and CD's contracts and make some room, make like 56 million or something. So I'm guessing
Jerry's
that's going...
trying to hype the shit out of free agency.
Yeah,
but
selectively aggressive.
But then he's selectively aggressive, but then he's saying like, oh, we're not going to let free agency like fill our voids. It's like, dude, you don't even know what you're saying anymore. Just shut up.
It's a mess. This is a prime example of the owner being too involved. Like, it seems like the optimal owner is like, he hires the guys and he trusts them and lets them do their job. And he'll mention, look, there's some things that'll be important to him, and he'll mention those and make sure those happen. But otherwise, he just makes his hires and lets them work, doesn't interfere too much. But yeah, and just like you're saying with the division, it's tougher because it was pretty much just the Eagles for the past however many 10 years or something, let's say, that, well, okay, not 10, but like the past years, it's really only been the Eagles they've been competing with, and now the Commanders are here and they have a rookie quarterback who's really good. Now they have to fight 2 other teams for not only the top of the division but even second place and a good playoff spot. But yeah, it's Cowboys are in a rough spot. Darn. But anyway, we're going to move on to the second phase of our program and talk about the draft. So mainly this will be talking about like what pick they have, primarily in the first round, and what positions they really need to get. I mean, we'll mention a few specific players if we want, but it's also some of the teams are a little more tough to judge. Like Giants, easy to talk about what pick or what player specifically they should get, but you have the Eagles who have the 32nd pick, which is really dependent on who's left. Does anyone fall? It's a little more tricky, but we'll go ahead and talk about it. We'll do alternate format again just to be consistent. But yeah, starting again with the Philadelphia Eagles. They picked 32 in the first round. We do not have a second round pick, but we have now like 3 fourth round picks, or I believe with compensatory picks for losing like Josh Sweat and Milton Williams, we'll have more third round picks. But the roster is pretty complete. I mean, I don't think it would hurt to get another linebacker, because I know Nakobe Dean needs some surgery. He might miss some games at the beginning of the season, but we might re-sign Oren Burks. I don't know, but I don't think it would be a hurt to get another linebacker in the draft. Otherwise, just edge. I mean, definitely in the later rounds, it'd be fun to get a tight end, because we might release Dallas Goedert because he's a big cap hit. But I think at some point definitely get a tight end. This is a really deep tight end class from what I've heard. But I think you have to go edge, really, or just pass rusher. maybe linebacker in the first round. Some names I hear a lot is like Jahad Campbell. There's some other edges, and a lot of teams are projected to take edges in the end of the first round. So it just really seems like who's left, who do you like, or what's the best player available. I know James Pierce from Tennessee. I believe it was James Pierce, but one Tennessee player was a popular pick, but I think he did pretty well in the combine, so he might have gone up out of our range. I don't know, but really it's just going to be who falls to us in the first round of a pass rusher. Maybe we'll trade up. I wouldn't put it past Howie to say, like, we really like this guy. We're going to trade up a bit. But it doesn't seem – I haven't done a lot of work on looking at what pass rushers there are and how talented they are. I mean, if there's some guy really good that's dropping, then maybe we'll trade up for him. But I don't know. I'd be a little surprised if we traded up a lot. But regardless, a trade is probably more probable than not, especially in the later rounds. We'll definitely have trades. But, yeah, honestly, like I said, we don't really have a lot of holes. Let's let Dallas Goedert go. Definitely need new tight ends. And just drafting pass rushers good. I mean, with losing Milton Williams and probably Sweat, I mean, we have Moro Jomo. He looked pretty promising. We have backups for those guys, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, Josh Sweat, we have even Bryce Huff. Maybe he does better. But then we also have Jalen Hunt. He played in the Super Bowl. He got half a sack or something. But he was like a fourth-round pick, lots of talent, but went to a small school. So he can kind of slide up, fill in Sweat's spot. And so technically we don't need pass rusher, but, I mean, we saw how we won the Super Bowl, and why not reload at that position? But, yeah, so definitely a pass rusher, definitely defense in this first round.
Well, I think the Commanders are going to go the similar route. That's what I've been hearing a lot from a bunch of their mock drafts. I've heard a bunch of things, too, about maybe, like, fixing their running back problem of just, like, average or even, like, another receiver for them. But I just think defense is what they need to focus on. I think offense can be rebuilt through free agency just fine, and Daniels is good enough of a QB to kind of carry a maybe not so, like, pop eyes wide open, like, oh, wow, offense, but he can make them great. I think you need to focus on what was the reason you really couldn't get to the Super Bowl, which one of them was the turnovers, to be fair, in that championship game, but another one of them was just, especially the rush defense was one of the worst. And an edge rusher will help with that. And you mentioned them, Quinn, that they're kind of falling towards the end of the draft. And that's exactly where the Commanders are. They're the 29th pick this year. And I mentioned him a little bit earlier. I think Mike Green out of Marshall fits them perfectly. I got a quote here from Jordan Reed. I think he's from ESPN. So they said with his traits and burst, because I think he had a pretty good combine, he's an edge presence who could play right away. Scouts that he's talked to don't have a projection consensus grade or draft rate John Green as his projections. They say they continue to be all over the place, but I think if you're the Commanders, you take a shot, especially with the free agents like Garrett gone at edge. I feel like that's in pass rush, the edge. We see how much of an impact they make. Look at Garrett. Look at TJ Watt. They can make or break defenses. So I think you take the shot here and you go with the edge rusher from Marshall, a smaller school. Because especially if he's got like a pretty good burst, like he mentioned and I think we saw from him in the combine, I think it's a good start. They need to do a lot more, obviously. Like there's a couple corners in the later picks. Like I haven't gone that too much into detail about it, but I think that's a good way to start for the Commanders.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, we're not going to go super in depth with all. We're not going to go rounds. We'll get into the draft more later on.
Every round.
Yeah. No. We're just giving you guys a good overview of the season. So that way you kind of know what's up, but I don't think you care about what the Commanders are going to do in the third round if you're not a Commanders fan. But if you are, then, there's lots of mock drafts online. You can have a great time there. But moving on to the Giants. Now, the Giants have the third pick. And so it's kind of like the Eagles in the sense of it really depends on what the teams above them do. So the Tennessee Titans have the number 1 pick, and the Browns have the 2nd pick. And of course, we'll talk about those teams respectively when we come to their divisions. But it really depends on what they do for the Giants, because Giants, they have to take a quarterback. I mean, even if Abdul Qadir falls to them, and let's say the Titans choose like Cam Ward and the Browns take Travis Hunter. They can't take a pass rusher. They need a quarterback. And Shadur Sanders. I don't know what I'm saying. Anyway, but yeah, it really depends on what those first teams do, because they need a quarterback. They really do. They can't take Abdul Qadir would be great, and a great pass rusher. So unless they could like get Sam Darnold, who apparently is not staying with the Vikings, they need. So yeah, if they get a quarterback beforehand, sure, they could get the best player available, like Travis Hunter with the cornerback, or a tackle, or Abdul Qadir if he's there, or even Mason Graham, defensive lineman from Michigan, who looks really good. It really depends. But if they don't do anything about quarterback, they need to draft one. So, I mean, if Shadur Sanders goes to the Titans, if Cam Ward goes to the Browns, or vice versa, they can take Jackson Dart. But there seems to be a pretty big gap between the top 2 quarterbacks, and even they're not great. Like the Joe Burrow draft. Like Joe Burrow, 2 was good. So was Justin Herbert, and Hurts was 2nd round, but he turned out very good as well. It's all that level of talent. That caliber of talent still is a lot better than Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders coming out. So it's already kind of like, it feels like B plus quarterbacks of Shadur Sanders and Cam Ward, like solidly B. And then after that, it kind of drops down to like C minus D quarterbacks, and like Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers from Texas. It really depends. And I've heard that like Cam Ward isn't the best at like decision making. He does well, but he could do terrible also. Shadur Sanders has a similar thing. His throwing can be not so great sometimes. So it's not a great draft. But the Giants still need a quarterback. So it almost seems best for them if they would pick somebody up in free agency, even Aaron Rodgers for a year until next year when there's potentially better quarterbacks. But yeah, honestly, for the Giants, if I had to say who they'd pick, it's if the Titans or Browns get Abdul Qadir, which I don't think the Browns are at this point because they just re-signed Myles Garrett. Like, they could have a great pass rush, but when they could have a new quarterback, when they just restructured Watson's contract and not really to kind of fix that problem a bit, they need a quarterback. So, and I think Cam Ward's going to go first overall. At least that's the big hype recently. I don't know. We'll get more into that later when we do like draft episodes. But yeah, I think the Giants might end up with Shadur Sanders or Jackson Dart, I guess. I really don't know if they would take somebody else besides quarterback. But they need to take a quarterback. I'm going to say Shadur Sanders for them. And we'll just see what happens.
Yeah, that's one of the more hyped up things. At least with the bad team, you get to like the draft is a little more interesting, especially this year in the quarterbacks. But I don't know, the Aaron Rodgers speculations, man, are run high. He don't have to move that far. Same stadium.
Yeah.
And a pretty good offensive-minded coach. But in terms of the Cowboys draft, it's a little bit weird. They're in the 12th pick. It's kind of the highest they've been in a while because they're used to being a playoff team. But I've heard a lot of things and a lot of mocks that they could trade it, which I get it. I get it having compensation, but to have that high of a pick, I don't, unless it's a really good return, I don't see the reasoning for it. So I'm going to just have this as a situation where they're not going to trade it. They're going with the pick. I've heard cornerback, I've heard edge rusher, but I really think they need to give CD some help because they have just not been able to find their number 2 because Turpin, he's fast. I believe Turpin's the fastest player in the league. He's a good returner, not receiver, though. And Brandon Cooks is washed, and they just really haven't found anybody yet. So I was back and forth between a few. Matthew Golden is known. They're two kind of different types of receivers. Matthew Golden from Texas is more of a speed guy and is known for his really good route running, especially at the line of scrimmage. While I hope I say this right so I don't get canceled, Teteroa McMillan from Arizona is 6'5", 210, and he's a good route runner. So he's a little bit taller. So maybe more of a Pickens-esque type of receiver. Like he said, he naturally plucks balls out of the air, which is kind of CD's specialty too. So it's a little bit tough, but yeah, he gives you kind of that vibe of a Pickens. So, but I think they're going to go with the Arizona receiver McMillan here just because they already have Turpin. They don't need another guy like Golden who's your speed. I feel like they need more of a guy who's going to go up and get it, maybe more of a deep threat. CD's a deep threat too, but I feel like he needs some help. So I feel like McMillan is the way to go. He's projected around then. He's projected right now in most drafts as the 15th. So I just think it makes the most sense for Dallas.
Yeah, I think it's smart too that you went with that because there's a really deep running back class this year from what I understand. So as exciting as
but I think though it's not till
Turpin?
later. It's not till later that these running backs are like the Boise State guy's the only guy that's hyped to be in the first round. Everybody else is kind of later.
Yeah, I heard one guy was moving up after the combine. Yeah, Ashton Genty. But
yeah, he's from Boise State. He's like the guy. He almost won the Heisman. People argued he should have. So
yeah, I like that you picked the wide receiver because I mean Genty's going to be good, but they could get in the second round. There's Mario Hampton from North Carolina or Caleb Johnson from Iowa. I heard good things about him, but they could get a good running back later on and get the talented wide receiver in the beginning of the draft, which I think would be a better move. Excuse me. I think Ashton Genty would be more exciting, and Jerry Jones would be like, ooh, flashy. Ooh, we like. Ooh, the Goblins are here. The Goblins are telling me to pick Ashton Genty. But, yeah, I like that pick.
And that is going to do it here for this episode. I like this format. I think this is the way to go. Like Quinn said, we hope to get a special guest on here. And if we do, we are going to move over to the AFC East. And that'll be a little bit different because it will be three of us. And we are just going to let the friend, spoiler, he's a Bills fan, go over his team. And then meanwhile, we'll pick and choose who we pick for the rest of the division. But stay tuned for that next week. But for Dylan Shields and Quinn Schmiedel, thank you guys here. It's going to be a hell of an offseason. Have a good week, guys.
See you guys.